This is Atalanta, the fleet-footed huntress. Part 1. The Bear on the Mountain. In a sunny land in Greece called Arcadia, there lived a king and a queen who had no children. They wanted very much to have a son who might live to rule over Arcadia when the king was dead. And after many years, a child was born to them, but it was a little girl. "What is a girl good for?" raged the king. "She can never do anything but sing and spin. If the child had been a boy, he might have learned to do many things, to ride, to hunt, and to fight in the wars, and by he would rule as king of Arcadia. But this girl can never be a king." Then in his wild rage he called one of his men and bade him to take the babe out to a mountain where there was nothing but rocks and thick woods, and leave it there. The man carried the child far up the mountainside and laid it down on a bed of moss in the shadow of a great rock. The child stretched out its baby hands towards him and smiled, but he turned away and left it there, for he did not dare to disobey the king. For a whole night and a whole day the babe lay on its bed of moss, wailing for its mother, but only the birds among the trees heard its pitiful cries. At last it grew so weak from want of food that it could only moan and move its head a little from side to side. Just before dark on the second evening, a she-bear came strolling down the mountainside from her den. She was looking for her cubs, for some hunters had stolen them that very day while she was away from home, and they were nowhere to be found. As the stars came out, the she-bear heard the babe's moans and saw it lying helplessly on a bed of moss. She looked at it kindly, licked its face with her warm tongue, and then lay down beside it, just as she would have done with her own little cubs. The babe was too young to feel afraid, and it cuddled close to the old bear and felt that it had found a friend. After a while it fell asleep, but the bear guarded it until morning and then went down the mountainside to look for food. In the evening the bear came again and carried the child to her own den under the shelter of a rock where vines and wildflowers grew. And every day after that she came and gave the child food and played with it. Soon all of the bears on the mountain learned about the wonderful cub and came to see it, and not one of them tried to harm it. The little girl grew up quickly and became strong. After a while she could walk and run among the trees and rocks and brambles on the round top of the mountain. But her bear mother would not allow her to wander far from the den beneath the rock where the vines and the wildflowers grew. One day some hunters came up the mountain to look for game. One of them pulled aside the vines that grew in front of the old bear's home. He was surprised to see the beautiful child lying on the grass and playing with the flowers she had gathered. But at sight of him she leaped to her feet and bounded away like a frightened deer. She led the hunters on a fine chase among the trees and rocks, but there were a dozen of them, and by circling her they managed at last to catch her. The child struggled and fought as hard as she knew how, but it was no use. The hunters carried her down the mountain and took her to the house where they lived on the other side of the forest. At first she cried all the time, for she sadly missed the bear that had been her mother to her for so long. But the hunters were very kind and treated her like their daughter, and so slowly she also came to like her new home. The hunters named the girl Atalanta. When she grew older, they made her a bow and arrows and taught her how to shoot, and they gave her a light spear and showed her how to carry it and how to hurl it at game or at an enemy. They took her with them when they went hunting, and there was nothing in the world that pleased her so much as roaming through the woods and running after the deer and other wild animals. Her feet became very swift, so that she could run faster than any of the men. Her arms were so strong and her eyes were so sharp that with her arrow or her spear she never missed the mark, and she grew up to be very tall and graceful, and was known throughout all of Arcadia as Atalanta, the fleet-footed huntress.